Good morning, everyone. It is April 8th, and we're having a fire service workshop this morning. I would like to welcome everybody, and Commissioner Barrick, would you do the honor of leading us in the invocation, please?
Dear Lord, we ask you to be with us today. Help us to make wise decisions for our county, our residents, and be thankful for what we have. And please be with those that can't be here, whether they're in the service or in the hospital or just away, enjoying life. And thank you for everything you've given us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Commissioner Davis, you would like to lead us in the pledge?
Yes, ma'am.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Short and sweet.
Roll call, please.
Yes, ma'am. This is a public workshop of the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners at 8th day of April 2025. In attendance are Chair Rebecca Bays, First Vice Chair Diana Finnegan, Second Vice Chair Janet Barrick, Commissioner Jeff Kennard, Commissioner Holly Davis, County Administrator Steve Howard, and County Attorney Denise E. Diamond-Line.
Mr. Howard, it appears that we have some additional information.
Yes, the 15-year facility replacement plan and the 10-year vehicle replacement plan.
Very good. So next on the agenda is the workshop, B1 Citrus County Fire Assessment Program Workshop Update. Do you want to say anything first, Chief, or?
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Really appreciate your time and being able to deliver this information to you. Hopefully you'll find it useful and, we can come up with a solution. So first I'm going to call Sandy up and she's going to go over her presentation. And then when she completes, I'll conduct my presentation for you. Okay?
Very good. Thank you.
Good morning, Sandy Newbarth with Anser Advisory. I'm here we were hired about a year and a half now ago to update the county's fire assessment program. I was personally also the person who did the original study in 2013. And so I'm here to present what we updated. First of all, I want to remind everybody what is a fire assessment. It's simple. It's a charge imposed against property to pay for fire protection services. It does not include EMS services. It's a home rule revenue source, so it's case law driven, not statutorily driven. The primary case law says that, one, it has to benefit property. The courts have said fire protection services up to the level of first responder do benefit property. EMS does not. And that's why we don't include the EMS component. And then it has to be fairly and reasonably apportioned amongst all benefiting property owners. And that's what we did. We looked at a fair and reasonable apportionment of the cost for the fire protection services. So like I said, you initially implemented the fire assessment program in 2013 for fiscal year 13-14. Last year you certified approximately $7.3 million, and that's based off of a $79 residential rate, and your commercial was 7 cents a square foot, industrial warehouse 2 cents a square foot, 12 cents a square foot for institutional. Then your vacant land has a per parcel charge up to 160 acres and then a per acre charge after that. So it's $4.07 for each vacant land parcel up to 160 acres and then 3 cents an acre after that. You also have adopted maximum rates, and the reason for that is because of to implement it and collect it on the tax bill, you have to send first-class notices to property owners every time you increase even just a little bit. So that gives you that little bit of wiggle room between $79 and $100 so that you don't have to incur that additional cost to increase it, say, $5 if you chose to. The methodology that we're going to be, that we did for this study is the same methodology you have. It's called the historical demand methodology. It's court tested and approved. I'd say about 90 to 95% of the fire assessments in the state of Florida use this methodology or a version of this methodology. So it's most widely adopted, easy for property owners to understand. Because what we do is we look at the history, who's demanding the services from the fire department to apportion the cost in the future, because past demand equals future demand. So there's 4 primary components when we do our study. First of all, we look at the service delivery. We look to see, do you have an EMS component? You do. You have ALS with transport. Now, the difference between the 2013 study and this study is in 2013, you were a first responder only. So you're going to see a few little differences, and it's going to make a difference when we start looking at some of the call data. You've expanded a lot. You have 10 stations. We look at your apparatus and your fire flow, and based on the NFPA standards, the National Fire Protection Association standards, you have enough fire flow for unlimited. What that means to us is there's no square foot cap for the non-residential. And then we look at your benefit area. It is the unincorporated area of the county. The second component that we look at is your fire accessible budget. And since you do have that EMS component, we have to pull out the EMS cost and only look at the fire. The third component is to develop the cost apportionment. That's the call data analysis. And again, because we aren't funding EMS, we take the EMS calls out and only look at those fire calls and who's demanding from the fire type calls. And then the fourth is we look at your parcel data. How many dwelling units you service, square footage, acres. So the 5-year pro forma budget. What we do is we develop a 5-year average budget. We start with your adopted budget, and then we add annual increases, similar to how you project a budget out in the future. And then we included the public safety 10-year plan and your public safety CIP. Then we also include the miscellaneous assessment expenditures. And again, we only use the fire protection portion of the budget. And the way we look at that is we take your budget and we apply factors to each line item component, saying, is this based on staffing? If it is, it gets an admin factor. And so while you may run more EMS calls, the courts have recognized that it takes more resources to fight fire calls, so you have to staff for the fire. So that's how we look at your budget. How are you staffing for fire versus how are you staffing for EMS? And then we develop that accessible fire protection budget. So your 5-year average budget, which is what all these rates are going to be based off of, is the $22,799,000, $22.8 million. The cost apportionment, and this is key. Again, we look at the incident call data. We looked at calendar year 2023. And
Could I interrupt you for just
Sure.
a moment? Commissioner Finnegan?
My apologies, you're moving a little faster than I am.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. On the 5-year pro forma budget, between I guess this is probably more of a question for Chief. It looks like between last year's budget and this year's budget, there's a significant jump, but we didn't add the third person. So I was thinking we'd have a jump with the third person, but I can't remember, why is there such a jump between those 2 years in personnel? Mr. Howard, do you mind if Chief comes up here?
So,
Absolutely, come forward.
yeah, and keep in mind that we started with the 23-24 adopted budget, so not last year's budget, and that might be what you're thinking about too, because we got started on this about a year and a half, 2 years ago. We weren't ready to present it last year.
Okay.
Before you had to adopt the rates. So that might be what you're looking at, because I don't think that 23-24 budget had the enhanced, the staffing plan, the CIP public safety plan in it. Is that correct?
Right, and I'm sorry, I'm making this bigger so I can see the numbers. I'm saying the jump in personnel, but that's not where I saw the jump in total expenditures. But there was a jump like by $1 million. All right, I'm gonna fine tune my glasses and put a pin in this. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. Hey, I've got a smaller one I'm looking
I'm
at
a
over
little
here.
bit nervous that my eyes might be getting worse, like right in front of the public.
I think you have the printout.
In front of me?
Might be easier to look at.
That-
The back
So there was $1
Forgive
million.
my poor eyesight.
So if you can look at the CIP plan, the 10-year plan, that line item. The two, those are the
Yes.
where it has a lot of shifting
I see.
to enhance the services that you're currently providing.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So the cost apportionment. So what we do is we got your calendar year 2023 call data. And again, we're not including the EMS costs, so we don't include the EMS calls. When the fire department goes out to a call, they fill out what's called a FIFRS, a Florida Incident Report, and they assign a situation found. So for every call that they go out, they fill out this report, and it says situation found. What type of a situation did I go to? So if it equated to an EMS type call, we remove those. We don't even look at those because we're not funding EMS. So then we looked at, for those fire calls, then they also fill out another thing that they answer is the fixed property use. What type of property did I go to when I went to this whatever type of call? So then we look at those. We look at the fire calls, and then we look at where they went. Did they go to residential? Did they go to commercial, industrial warehouse, institutional, vacant land? So we look at that. And so basically what you can see is that out of the 1-year call data, the just under 3,000, and it was only for the fire calls, fire protection calls, 74.10% went to residential. Therefore, whatever budget you do decide to fund, 74.1% of it has to be funded from residential. And your commercial was 7.24. This is where my eyes are getting tested. Industrial warehouse, 0.9. Institutional, 5.02. And your vacant land, 12.74. So, and you can see the differences in the shift in that last column between the last study and this study. And what we've seen is a lot shifted from the residential and the non-residential rate categories over to the vacant land. We would expect that because you did change your level of service. So in the last study, it was first responders. So all of those EMS calls that got pulled out this time did not get pulled out last time because you weren't providing ALS at that time. So you were only first responder. So what we see happening when that happens is that the land calls, because not very often do they go to a heart attack on a vacant land property or any of that stuff. So we would expect to see exactly what happened. So your vacant land demand has gone up, your residential has gone down a little bit, and your commercial has gone down a little bit. But also, too, your institutional has gone down, too, which is a good thing because you have made the policy decision to exempt government parcels and institutional tax exempt parcels. Now, when you exempt them, since it is a policy decision, it comes a buy down. So the general fund or some other non-restricted fund, I believe your MST may fund it, funds those buy downs. So we can't shift that burden over to those that are paying. So we can't say, we're not going to charge government, so let's keep them out of the loop and let's recalculate the rates without government, because then the other property owners would be paying more than their fair share. So we don't do that. So, but most of your exemptions are in the institutional category. So when you see that exemption rate go down, that means your institutional and your government buy down also goes down. So the amount that has to come from the general fund would go down too. This is key. This is your key to keeping you legally defensible. Whatever budget you want to fund, whether it's to continue to fund that $7.5 million budget, or, you know, a $1 million budget or a $22 million budget, it has to be divided into these pieces in order to keep you legally defensible. And then how are we going to charge each building or each vacant land parcel? Residential is on a dwelling unit basis, a per dwelling unit basis. Non-residential is on a per square foot basis, again, without a cap. So everybody pays for all of their square footage. And vacant land, again, the first 160 acres is on a per parcel basis, and then it's a per acre basis after that. So what does that mean? Then we do the math problem, and I apologize because of the totals are on the vacant land over 160 acres. So the total calls was 2,888. So residential, you have 74.10% of the calls. Based on that $22.8 million budget, they would fund $16,893,000 divided by the 72,956 dwelling units to get a $232 per dwelling unit rate. These are the maximum rates that you can go to, and you do that with each category. So 18 cents per square foot for the commercial, 5 cents per square foot for industrial warehouse, 22 cents per square foot for institutional. And your vacant land parcel, this is where I'm saying the demand went up, and we would have expected that because if you have a different level of service. So now instead of the $4.07, it would pay $48.97 per parcel, and then the additional acreage would be 23 cents an acre. That was your maximum rates. Here's some alternative rate scenarios. Usually when we talk about the rates, we focus on the residential because it's easier for everybody to understand. Logically, every dwelling unit pays the same. You don't do that with your commercial, your non-residential, because of it varies based on the size. So again, your $232 per dwelling unit rate will generate $22.8 million. With your buy down, and I do not have the breakdown of the buy down of what goes to government versus institutional tax exempt versus agricultural parcels. That is a statutory exemption. It's not a policy decision. And then you have an exemption for totally and permanently disabled veterans. So that is about $1.765 million that needs to be funded from some other source, which would net you about $21 million. $150 per dwelling unit rate would net you about $13.5 million. And your buy down would be $1,175,000. There's the $175 rate, which would net you $15.8 million, and $125 rate, which would net you $11.3 million. And then $100 rate, which is what you're currently at as your maximum, would net you about $9 million. So these are some options that we put out there for you. Be happy to give you other options if you'd like to see. And again, I believe staff will most likely recommend that whatever rates you go to this year, you also do another maximum. So so that you can do the notices and notice all the property owners, and then have that little bit of wiggle room in the future going forward. So to implement the updated study, we're doing the workshop today to get feedback and input from the commission. You already have an ordinance in place, so you don't have to adopt an ordinance, but what you would have to do is adopt an amended and restated initial assessment resolution. That's where you're going to update your methodology and your apportionment. You will set your public hearing, direct first-class notices to be mailed, and publish notice. and set the highest maximum rates for that year. Just like when you set your trim, you set the highest maximum. You can go down at the final public hearing, but you can't go up. So that would be scheduled, right now it's July 8th, have some wiggle room, we're still a little bit early. Notices would go out August 19th. They would be mailed to every property owner and advertised in the newspaper. And then you would come back and have your final public hearing September 9th, in which you'd make the final decision and you would adopt your final amended and restated final assessment resolution. And moving forward, I believe staff is going to ask for policy direction on rates, keep the same exemptions, and anything else that you have questions about, I'm happy to answer it. I think the chief also has a presentation, so I don't know if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. But this is my end of my presentation.
Board members, do you have any questions for the presenter?
Yeah, I do.
Commissioner Barrick.
All right, when you did all of this, did you take into account the increase in residents and houses and commercial that are coming to the county within the next 2 years?
No. We look
Okay.
at what it is now.
So you looked at it, what it is now, so with all of these increases that we are adding with the development, we need to take that into consideration also.
In future years,
Okay.
yes. And so the rates would be applied to them. And that's why we recommend, you guys have waited a little bit longer than what we recommend. We recommend updating about every 5 years to account for any increases because when you get, so like if you were to get a big booming industrial park or something like that, your industrial demand may also go up. You may have more units in the industrial category, but your demand may also go up. So when you change your level of service, or when you have areas that a certain type of growth, you would definitely want to look at it. Now, I will let you know, while we did this study in 2013, you were a first responder. When you went to ALS, we did look at what you had and made sure that you weren't overfunding for EMS. So we did do that analysis to make sure that you were not overfunding. So you were still legally defensible in that you weren't at your maximum rates from the prior study, so you were fine.
Okay, so when you did the study back in 2013, when we had approximately 90,000 people, and now we have 172,000?
Oh, yeah.
There has been a significant
Oh,
increase.
and we've looked at that, yes.
Okay.
What I'm saying is your prior study, you did not overfund. So what we want to make sure is you're not funding EMS out of this, because then you wouldn't be legally defensible. So we did look at that back when you went to ALS. But yes, this takes into account all your new growth, and that's why there's been some shift in the demand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Kennard.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure that I'm missing something here, but I'm looking at your 5-year pro forma budget, and the assessable budget for 23-24 was, say, $18 million. But on the page that shows us what our options are going forward, if we hold the rate at $79 per dwelling unit, that only nets $7.3 million. There's $11 million difference there between the budget and what the MSBU produces.
Correct. And it's being made up from some other source right now. You're not completely funding your fire assessment, your fire department with the fire assessment, from my understanding, correct, Chief?
Okay, so we're going to hear about that other $11 million.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anyone else?
So the other part of that is funded through the MSTU, and then, of course, that includes your transfers and your reserves.
Okay, you know how much comes through the MSTU?
We can get you that number for sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so Today, we're here to talk about the future and how we sustain strength in our fire protection services in the face of the growing demand and increasing cost. Come back.
Just for clarification, that's on page 57 of your handout on your MSTU.
So Citrus County is growing, and with growth comes increased demand for emergency services. Whether it's new residential developments, commercial expansions, or increase in traffic on our roads, we're seeing more calls and more complex calls more than ever. Our system must grow with the community to maintain service levels our residents expect and deserve. Our current funding model includes both the MSTU and an MSBU, and while it's gotten us here, it's no longer sustainable for where we need to go in the future. We've prioritized our challenges on this slide: staffing, apparatus, and our stations, all of which impacting our ability to meet the growing demands. These aren't just budget issues, they're also operational issues or operational readiness issues. And if we don't address them now, they become harder and more expensive to fix later. To meet these demands, we propose an increase to the MSBU at a minimum of $150 per dwelling. This would generate about $5.8 million in additional revenue, assuming the MSTU stays the same. We worked with Answer Advisory to ensure that this is equitable and defensible assessment model based on the actual service demand. Our goal is not just to solve today's issues, but to secure sustainable long-term funding for fire protection in Citrus County. Let's talk about staffing. Currently, 2 firefighters per engine, which is below the state and the national recommendations. Our goal is to staff 3 firefighters per engine. That additional firefighter can improve operational efficiency by 15% and allowing us to rescue victims faster and reduce both the risk for the public and our personnel. Time and efficiency is extremely important when seconds count, and having 2 of the 3 firefighters on the truck ready to work on arrival increases the capability to effectively rescue trapped victims, meaning when we arrive at a scene, if we're waiting for that driver, that second person to get dressed, that creates an issue. If we have 3 people on the truck, 2 of them come off the truck immediately already dressed, ready to go into that fire. Because obviously the driver is not going to be dressed out in his full gear with his air pack on. Does that make sense? And of course, this also significantly increases our ability to make entry during structure fires. And we're asking to fund 13 new firefighter positions, which this includes salary, benefits, uniforms, and their gear. Apparatus, and we know that we worked hard back when Commissioner Kennard was on with the previous board to improve this, but our fleet is, it's starting to age. And the reason it's starting to age is because of the costs they're rising rapidly. 2 years ago, a new engine cost us $568,000. Next year, that number will be over $800,000 with a 2-year lead time, meaning we have to put our notification into build well in advance. If we don't act now, we'll fall behind in replacements, and we'll have some issues with fleet, and we don't want to run into those same issues because that jeopardizes our emergency response. Our 10-year apparatus plan covers all vehicles, and that's engines, ladders, tankers, brush trucks, command vehicles, everything that we have on the fire side. By increasing funding now, we can buy outright and avoid financing, allowing us to save money for long-term and ensuring that we're ready to respond. Thanks. Stations. Most of our stations were built in the 80s, some of them even earlier. They were designed for volunteers and not, it's not made for housing 24/7 career staff. They're not, they don't have the storm-related construction, significant living quarters, or enough garage bays. Several of our apparatus, we actually have to park outside in the back side of the station. During the recent storms, we could only house 2 shifts safely. And that, to me, that's not acceptable. We should be able to call all our shifts back when we have a storm. And the main reason was because we didn't have room to house all those people safely. We have a 15-year facilities plan to modernize our infrastructure and ensure that our personnel have a safe, functional place to work and stay for those 24 hours. At the end of the day, our core service depends on 3 things: the people, apparatus, and facilities. These things are the backbone of every emergency response, and if we let one of those fall behind, the system as a whole suffers. The funding plan we've proposed addresses all 3 sustainably and strategically. We understand the importance of balancing service needs with financial responsibility, and we're open to exploring multiple MSBU levels, and we'll work closely with OMB and bring back a combination that the board wishes to explore. For example, when she showed you the max rate, you could bring the MSTU down completely and use that max rate, which brings that same revenue source that we need in order to move forward with this plan. However, we fund the EMS subsidy out of the general fund, and then of course the buyback. The buyback or the exemptions are paid out of the general fund. You could potentially, pay that out of the MSTU on the fire side. Our EMS revenue, well, this is not about EMS. I just want to let all of you know our EMS revenue is trending in a positive direction, and we anticipate that this will allow us to reduce the subsidy tremendously here in the future. In the meantime, as I said, the MSTU can help support that if you choose to choose a higher level of the BU. But like I said, we can bring back a combination of any of your liking. And then, of course, in closing, I want to thank you for your time and your attention. With your support, we can maintain and improve exceptional service Citrus County Fire Rescue provides today and for years to come. We're proud to serve this community, and with the right investment, we'll continue doing so at the highest level. Questions?
Board?
And if you want, we can also, at a later time, bring back a more comprehensive presentation of where we're at with fire and EMS, because I know that Commissioner Kennard had asked for that information.
Do we have a breakdown on the residential calls?
Well,
Yes. So, okay.
we can get you that information.
I mean, how many total structure fires did we have that were complete losses? Were some of these 2,140 calls deployed and not needed, or?
No, on average, we run about 100 structure fires a year in this county. So that's kind of on average. As far as the difference between, a fully involved structure fire and, the 25%, say, a room and contents, we'd have to go back and get you that information if that's what you want.
And keep in mind,
Can you come up to, sorry.
so we're looking at the first responder type fire calls. So it can be, trapped in an elevator, or, just a false alarm, or, a public service, something that doesn't equate to the level of EMS. And one thing, I apologize, I forgot to introduce Heather Encinosa, who's special general counsel here, special counsel for the special assessments, and she's here if you have any legal questions. I apologize for that.
Thank you.
Yes,
Commissioner Barrick?
Chief,
yes, ma'am.
I'd like to say, I like seeing that this is a plan for Citrus County's future. That this is like a factory doing preventive maintenance, and you're giving us what it's gonna cost to do this preventive, okay? And it's necessary for all the residents and the workers to be safe, to have a good fire department, a good EMS department. This one-time increase, however, should not be an increase every year. It should be like maybe we take this increase and we do like we did for a 5-year time period, because with looking at all the numbers, it shows you have taken into consideration, we do need to replace, but we also need to increase the number of people working in the fire department for the safety of everybody. And that's, to me, that's very important. That's part of the mission statement of the commissioners, is have a safe county. So I like what you got here, and I have no problem with going to either the 175 or the 150 at one shot, and then don't come back next year and the
No.
next year. Wait a little while, because it'll give you time to do what you need to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Finnegan?
When you're talking about implementing the 3 on the truck and then adding more staff, how does that fit in with the grant that you had and when does that grant end? The one that fully paid for the firefighters?
We applied for the grant, but it's a competitive grant, and we were not selected for that grant.
Okay, so we don't have any of those grant-funded
No,
positions
ma'am.
at this time?
We can continue to apply for them, even if we decide to go after these 13 personnel and then take that money and use it for CIP projects moving forward. So even if you would like us to apply for the SAFER grant moving forward, we can still do that.
Okay. So I like the vision for the future. Obviously, we want a top-notch fire department. The sheriff is also asking for deputies that we have promised. So we have to be careful, because everything that comes before us sounds really great, right? We want the best of everything. The only problem is that translates, by the time we get to our budget hearings, huge tax increase. I understand for a long time that you've been trying to get that third person. I think you could get me there on that. As far as the extra $3.5 million every single year added to the budget to go to buildings, I think everybody would want that. I'm sure Animal Services would want that, and the sheriff would want that, and the county would want that to add buildings. I think the way we get there on the buildings is we talked about how much better EMS is doing, and that should be saving taxpayers money. But once you're saving the money, maybe we can, as your team's working hard on that, it can translate back into these buildings and fire services. I understand the need for more. I just don't know. I don't know that we can add this almost $6 million into the budget and then just keep it going every single year. I don't think the taxpayers are ready for that. So in my opinion with this board, let's get Chief, what he told me was the most important thing is that third firefighter that translates to safety of our residents. And then we can talk about the rest, but the $6 million every year or close to makes me a little nervous. Thank you.
I guess that's the reason I would like to see the breakdown. If you have 100 structure fires, but the overall number of calls are 2,140 for residential, and then of course there's the other breakdowns. What I'd like to see is how many times do we actually require that third person in looking at the total number of what's going on? And I know that's a very difficult thing to look at, but are we funding for 1%, 5% of the need, or the breakdown and kind of looking at what's happening and, you know,
Well, from a resource point, one of the things that we look at is we utilize our resources. So if we have, let's say we have a vehicle accident, and that vehicle accident requires extrication. If we had 3 people on the engine, we may be able to effectively handle that call with an engine and a rescue, right? If we had 3 people, to where if we only had 2 people in that engine, we may have to send a second engine from a different community to that vehicle accident just to help do that extrication. So that one person doesn't pay off just on fire calls, it pays off on all the different assortment of calls that we respond to. And then, of course, you know, we're not talking about EMS here, but if we have a cardiac arrest and you have 5 people on the scene providing, you know, resuscitation efforts versus 4 people, you potentially just increase the chance of survivability for that patient because you have the 5 people on the scene, because they work as a team. And it's like it's kind of like watching the pit crew at NASCAR. And that's one of the goals when we provide CPR is to, you know, have the people there to make sure that we can perform those efforts that we need to.
Commissioner Barrick.
I don't remember very many of the commissioners ever going to the fire meetings with Sheriff Duessy and with Chief Craig. I did. You may have gone to them years ago before the fire department was taken away from the sheriff. At that point in time, it was explained in great detail about the 3 people and how when 2 people get there, 2 firefighters get there, they have to wait for a third person to get there before they can actually get out and do anything to help people. They can get things ready. But by increasing to that third person, that's a necessity. And to be able to say, you know, our equipment, you take a price of a car. It's going to go up tomorrow. It's going to go up the next day. If we have to have good equipment that works and is efficient for our firefighters, then we need to, like you said, order them 2 years in advance. They're not going to go down in price. So if we are stingy at the beginning, and I mean, I'm very careful when it comes to money, but if we are stingy at the beginning right now, then we're going to have a problem in 2 years. We keep adding this development and that development. And when we add more people, we do add more chance of disaster. And when we add houses that are closer and closer together, the opportunity for the fire to go spread from one house to the next residence to the next residence is much greater. So we need to have at least 3 firefighters to a truck. And we need to have more firehouses in more accessible areas, and that's not going to be free. So the thing is, when I look at this, I don't like to spend money. But if I look at this right, $175 is a $15 per month charge per residence. Now, that's an increase of $7. That's 2 gallons of milk or 1 dozen eggs. And I look at it reasonably as to what is it actually going to cost me? Is it going to cost me, you know, 1 dozen eggs? You know, right now I pay $29 for a dozen. Well, I get 18 eggs. Okay, so I can buy 1 less 18 pack of eggs to have good service for me, my neighbors, for everybody in the community. And that's how when I look at this, I try and price it out as to if I'm on Social Security, what can I afford? I went to Alice meetings last week. I lived Alice for years. I don't think any of you really did. You don't understand what Alice is actually about. And it's one of those where you do live paycheck to paycheck and pray that nothing happens. I don't want us to have a fire department that we send a truck and they can't do anything till a second truck gets there. And if the one truck is not available from Citrus Springs and it has to come from Pine Ridge, or it has to come from Hernando, these are not close stations. It's not going to take 20 seconds for that second truck to get there. It's going to take time. So we need to, when we look at this, it's not an increase that much as it is a helping of our community for the good. And that's why, you know, I said either the 175 or 150 would be a reasonable amount for our property owners.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Davis.
Chief Stevens, and by the way, excellent presentation. The gold standard at the national level, state level is actually 4 men on a, or 4 people on a truck, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
correct.
The minimum acceptable standard, it would be 3 on a truck.
Ideally, I mean, again, you know, it's, you'd have to really get the definition from the attorneys, but we put ourselves at risk when we don't have those people on the truck.
So my understanding from having gone into this subject pretty deeply before, what I believe Commissioner Barrick may have been sort of talking about was my understanding is that when you get to a structure fire, and if you have 3 on a truck, the 2 that are fully dressed can run directly in. The third one then runs the truck, the water,
Correct.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
And
That's
then
correct.
if, God forbid, anything happens, something collapses inside or whatever, you've got a third person outside to go bail people out.
Potentially.
But also if the truck, you could have 2 people only, they're in a structure fire and the water stops running
Correct.
because nobody's minding the truck.
That's correct.
That is the real danger there, correct?
That's one of the major issues.
Okay. Did you say a minimum of 150 was your recommendation?
That's our recommendation after reviewing the numbers and the information that we got from Answer is 150, which, you know, that equates to the taxpayer having a $71 increase in their BU on their tax bill from us.
And I assume that somewhere, knowing your professionalism, somewhere all of this between you and our budget director, all of this has been lined out in terms of, and I understand we're going to have another bite at this apple, so to speak, later. So
Yes.
I will do my due diligence before then. You figured out a master plan for the community on the CIP,
Yes.
and the 150 accounts for everything that you believe we need for the future, stepped out on an annual basis. So not all of it all at once, obviously.
Correct.
Would that
So
be an accurate statement?
the additional items that we just had sent to you guys, which is the apparatus replacement plan and the station replacement plan, includes all that information. So basically taking all that information and putting it together would be our plan moving forward. And we can provide you with that information cohesively.
And how, is there any poverty exemption on the MSBU?
I don't know if you have a hardship exemption or not, but if you don't, you can definitely put one in place. What it would be, it would be a 2-prong test. They have to own the property and it has to be eligible for homestead. So it has to be their primary residence and they have to be at whatever income limits you set. Usually if you don't have one already, you would use the HUD guidelines and you would set what limit that is. And if they qualified, you would pay it on their behalf, just like you do the other buy downs.
buy downs,
It
okay.
would be an annual exemption. So if for some reason they came into a windfall of money or something like that, so every year they would reapply if they qualify. And I don't know what the impact would be, but it would be a way. And you don't have to do it at 100%. You can say everyone's paying $79 right now, so they'll continue to pay the $79, but if this extra $71 or whatever you end up going to is a burden to to them and they qualify, then we'll exempt that other $71. Is your policy decision to set, but you do have the option of having a hardship exemption.
Thank you. There are so many exemptions to ad valorem that I particularly like MSBU's, but we always have to be mindful of not making people absolutely lose their homes if they're living on that much of a razor edge, but it needs to be a razor edge. Not everybody gets that. So I like the idea of putting EMS in the buy down in the MSTU, which comes out of property taxes, and MSBU for fire service. So And I'm sorry to hear about the SAFER grant. I hope you will continue to apply for it. I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Commissioner Finnegan?
We may want to look at some of these exemptions. Who else getting exempted? Is there places that could be paying for this? And then we are putting this on the backs of, as Commissioner Barrick said, the Alice individuals, but something, because I know a thing or two about living like that. And I will never forget, because that benefits the people here of what that feels like, living a life, growing up paycheck to paycheck, and then starting all back over with the sweetest little boy you'll ever meet in tow. And people like that don't go or even know how to file the exemptions. They don't bother with it. And it's not this extra 79, it's this extra. And then the promises that we've made to the sheriff's office, it's another extra, whatever that turns out to be. And then whatever the government comes to us at budget hearing, that'll just be another extra. It doesn't seem like $70 is that much, but it's plus another, plus another, plus another. Before you know it, the tax bill for next year, their taxes just went up hundreds of dollars. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. I think if people are paying attention, they see on their bill, they pay the $79, and they know they can prepare. The max the county can charge me is $100. So what I would suggest is, for the extra money, if you charge the $100 and then we added, as our consultant had said, put what we're allowed to charge, but now we're charging the 100, which they have prepared for the max, possibly, that covers your third person on the truck and doubles your money almost for apparatus. And then we had discussed, which I won't throw the dollar amount out because we discussed, like, you weren't sure about that, but a substantial amount of money that's being saved from that EMS subsidy. Well, it's already being spent. Let's start earmarking that for buildings. Like I said, every part of government would love to have $3.5 million just every year saying, here you go for buildings in the future. We would all want that for every department. I want to get you there, Chief. I really do. I want to get you there. What's absolutely critical, and I'm trusting you that the third people's critical. You need more money for the apparatuses, and we will work on the buildings. Obviously, that was one of our priorities this year for our legislative priorities. I think taxpayers have a knee-jerk reaction when it's such a huge increase, and we don't know what the entire budget's going to look like yet this year. So that is kind of where I am. The taxpayers, to the amount that they know they could be charged now, is $100. I would be good getting Chief where he needs for that, and then looking at it again in the future.
Commissioner Kennard?
Thank you. Chief, I didn't see in here where there's any impact fee money being used for some of these expenses to expand.
So impact fees are limited on what we can use them on. Unfortunately, you have to provide a new level of service, meaning if we were to open a new station somewhere not at our current locations, we can utilize part of the assessment for the current stations, as long as we're enhancing our services, which we're going to try to do with the airport station. However, we're very limited on what we can do with those funds. So we have to improve our service or add to it.
So the expanding capacity requirement under the impact fees would not, adding that third person, wouldn't that qualify? Or you already said the stations, would that be something that, rather than necessarily increasing this MSBU number, could we not look at the possibility of, when it's time to build that station or stations, bonding our fire impact fee to pay for that station at the time? And so then we're not adding $3.5 million a year to the budget.
We could, but again, I guess it's, if you don't want to have the money up front and you want to pay for it, and I'll let Heather come up here and explain that too.
Good afternoon, or I guess it's still morning. I've been up for so long because I had to drive down. But, so good morning. On the impact fees, I don't represent you on your fire impact fees, but you would not be able to use them for the personnel costs, even the additional personnel costs, because it's only for capital. If you were building a new station or you were expanding a station to add additional capacity, you could use impact fees to fund part of those costs. And also impact fees can be pledged to repay debt, provided there are some restrictions under state law. They have to be able, again, there has to be capacity available. Now, whether impact fees could be your only pledge is probably going to be a no, because you probably get a really high interest rate and need to back that up with something else, because impact fees come in a sort of unpredictable pattern, and banks like to be paid in a predictable pattern. So, but some of those things could probably be worked out. It's just that, as the chief said, you are limited in how you can spend those. And they're not going to fund a whole project in most cases unless you're building a completely new station that is a net increase to your station inventory.
Okay, so just replacing a station or moving a station is not going to qualify.
It's not unless there is a significant additional capacity. Like if you had a 2-bay station and you were going to make it into a 4-bay station, then you could probably fund part of it, that additional net increase, with impact fee revenue, but not the whole thing.
And one last question as it relates to impact fees. One of the stations, or maybe all of our existing outdated stations, Chief Stevens was suggesting that those needed to be expanded because we couldn't house an entire crew there, right? Or you couldn't call everybody back. You simply didn't have the room. So expanding the size of those stations, that would be somewhat partially fundable with impact fees?
It's going to have to add net capacity. So we'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis and see how, what kind of capacity increase to serve additional growth. Because if you're already serving it, but it's kind of in a deficient capacity, deficiencies cannot be funded by impact fees.
Okay, all right, thank you. Chief, do you have any comparison numbers to our neighboring counties? What those folks are paying for fire services?
Yes, sir, I do. So Marion County's at $199.91. Sumter County is completely MSBU funded. They're at $355.55. And Hernando County is at $365.62.
Any idea about Levy County?
No, we did not, because they do not have a 129.
129?
Yes, sir.
And we're currently updating Marion and Levy County this year, so we anticipate them going up.
Okay. And I know several years ago, there was a video played for the board, it's more than several years ago, because I think at the time Fire Services was still under Sheriff Dawsey. There was a video that was played showing how quickly fire spreads in a structure, and that after the initial point of starting the fire through a total loss was a matter of minutes. Is there a number, and I'm sure every structure is different, I have no doubt about that, but is there a number that's out there that at 8 minutes, at 11 minutes, it's a total loss?
So a flashover used to occur at 8 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Today, because of the increased products that we have in our homes being non-synthetic, the scientific studies have come out from NIST, and it is actually 3 to 5 minutes before a home will hit flashover stage, meaning everything's involved.
So 3 to 5 minutes, it's everything's engulfed in the fire.
Potentially, yes, sir.
Potentially.
And that's dependent on the the availability of oxygen in the room.
Sure.
It can deprive itself of oxygen if it's an enclosed area. So that number can obviously change in certain situations.
And what is our average response time for this? You said on average, we have 100 structure fires a year. What is our average response time in the last year or two?
About 8 minutes.
Okay. So at that point, potentially the structure has been fully engulfed for 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes?
Not all the time. We could go back and pull the statistics off the calls if we can get that information for you if you want.
I guess
I don't want to
where- I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I didn't want to give you a misrepresentation because again, it's, that 3 to 5 minutes can vary depending on the products that are in the home, the availability of oxygen in the room. So not every fire we go to is fully involved. If you go back to the early volunteer days, I would agree with you. 90% of the calls we went to, the homes were fully involved. We actually, believe it or not, we go to quite a few fires. We have room and contents by the time we get there.
I guess where I was going with this was, if these structures are fully engulfed for minutes before, before we're able to get there, I don't see that it makes a whole lot of difference whether we've got 2 men on a truck or 4 men on a truck. I don't know how that's going to save lives. It's certainly increasing the cost, and I'm not opposed to putting 3 guys there, but we're trying to figure out a way where we can cut some of these costs. This is a big ask. So last question or comment that I've got are the exemptions being brought up. The exemptions don't change the cost of the service. It's just a cost shift. So if we're going to start considering more of the exemptions, you're taking away from the number of people who are contributing to the cost of the fire services and adding it on the backs of other people who don't qualify for the exemptions. So I would be opposed to adding any additional exemptions because it is just a cost shift to a smaller number of people. That's all.
Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I did ask, and we do have the hardship exemption, veterans exemption, and first responders exemption.
Thank you.
We already have those.
Can I ask a question first? Chief, and maybe this will go to one of the ladies. An MSTU is based off of residential value, correct? Taxable value, so the assessment. So, Save Our Homes can have that 3%, that can go up every year. If we were to, there's a lot of chatter coming out of Tallahassee. We're gonna look at, property taxes, we're gonna look at sales tax, everything's on the table right now. I guess my question is, when I think about the 3% Save Your Home on the assessed value of a homesteaded home, and then you have commercial properties or you have investment properties, and they have a 10% cap that they can escalate every year. If you were to take the TU and shift that all over to a BU, so it's not based on valuation of the assessed value, then in my opinion, you have that TU is not escalating with the reassessed value every year of that home. What would that look like if you had it straight on a BU?
The $232. Yeah, we'd still have to fund the extra EMS component, which right now that's funded out of the general fund. So you could make a choice if you wanted to put that in and utilize the fire/EMS and MSTU to fund that for the subsidy. But, basically you're moving money around, as Commissioner Kennard mentioned.
But you're getting it, I mean, they're still paying it either way, but the adjustment for that on the TU is being adjusted by whatever the property is reassessed at on the ad valorem side every year.
Correct.
So if we shift that to a BU, it's just a flat
Flat
number.
rate, correct. So you're going to, I believe, and they can speak, I believe you're going to live off of the growth and the increase of structures for your increases in the budget.
So then my next question is, talk to me about ISO ratings. I know we've had the conversation about building the fire station in Inverness because we pick up approximately 20,000 households. That's a direct impact and savings to our citizens because the ISO rating for their insurance needs, that they get that adjustment and they have more available markets to them. What's that number look like across our county?
So it depends, and it varies depending on where you live. If you live within 5 to 7 miles of a fire station, then you receive that ISO rating of a 5Y, depending on if you have a municipal water system within your area. If you live outside of that area, then you're at a 9, meaning you're paying close to the maximum rate in fire insurance. So ideally, in the ideal world, your fire stations, you want to have them every 5 to 7 miles. You want to have 4 people on a truck, and that's where you get those low classifications of the ISO. However, we most recently did find out that at the rate that we're at, or the ISO level that we're at, you receive your maximum discount on your insurance premium at a 5. It doesn't, even though you may be a 4, you don't get a lower insurance
Right.
premium.
And are we, as a county, are we rated as a 5 for our fire services?
We are rated as a 5Y currently. We just recently went through a reassessment, so that may change. But right now, we're rated at a 5Y for those people that live within that 5 to 7 miles of a fire station. If you live outside of that 5 to 7 miles, then you're potentially a 9.
Exactly. And you have less products, meaning a carrier available to you, and then the quality of the policy becomes diminished. And what are our agreements? I know this all kind of started when Inverness took back their fire station. That displaced our fire station about a mile out into the Highlands, which kind of threw all of the Inverness Country Club area into that Category 9. So how do our MOUs or our agreements work with our municipalities?
So we have automatic aid, and then we have mutual aid. Automatic aid is they're automatically dispatched to the calls that we respond to. And then, of course, mutual aid is we get on scene and we realize we need more resources, and we've requested assistance from either city. Automatic aid, in order for it to count in your ISO rating, you have to, which we just recently found out, you have to completely cover the entire jurisdiction. So the ISO rating that is provided to the cities, they get a rating based on our automatic aid response for them. However, unfortunately, because they don't respond in our entire jurisdiction, we do not receive credit for the city's automatic aid that they provide to us.
Why? Or how would you change that?
So we are actually going to work with both the cities to try to come up with an agreement to where they become part of the closest unit response within the entire county.
Because we're responding to their calls automatically, correct? But
Yes,
they
ma'am.
don't respond to ours.
They respond to ours, like for the city of Inverness, they respond a mile out from the city.
And how does that work into budgetary when you're, if we have this mutual aid agreement, how does that work in the cost factors of what we're talking about?
I couldn't even begin to figure that one out. You know, we're providing those services for both the cities. And then, of course, you know, I guess we could use a response configuration. So if we are inadequate or one of us are unequal, then we could turn around and charge each other for those above and beyond responses. But we have potential rates that we could use, which would be the FEMA rates for an engine response or you know, if we respond to ladder. Just depends on what level you want to go to.
So if we had an agreement with Inverness where they were responding to our calls, if the mutual aid agreement was in reverse of what we currently have, then our residents that live in the Inverness Country Club area, they wouldn't necessarily be an ISO rating of a 9 now.
Correct.
Correct?
If the city of Inverness responded, closest unit response countywide, then of course that ISO rating would then be reclassified for those residents that live within that 5 to 7 miles of the Inverness Fire Station.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Barrick.
In response to Commissioner Finnegan, when it comes to fire insurance, if he puts 3 men to a truck, my policy goes down. Now, I have a 5 rating because I live within so many feet of a fire hydrant, and our water department does have the rating. But if I go down the street and on the other side of 41 in Citrus Springs, they don't have a 5 rating because they don't have water in the street. They don't have that yet.
Commissioner
There are-
Barrett, did you hear I was the only one that said to, I actually moved ahead so he could get the 3 on the
Well,
check?
see, that's the thing, but I want people to understand, you know, when I look at things, I look at things from, this is how much I have personally. If I can get a lower fire insurance policy, because it went up, it's only gonna be going up $5 per month if I take it down to $5 per month to the $71 from what I'm paying right now. Okay, so that's a doable number. Okay, my fire insurance is definitely gonna go down probably about $100 per year, which is more than the $5 per month, to make it affordable even for people that are on a very limited budget. And and a lot of the residents are on limited budgets. We went to a meeting and we saw that. There's all these people that are on limited budgets. Okay, having the third person is a productive thing for us as a county to do. And if it's only gonna cost a little bit of money at this point in time, and if he can say, I'm not gonna increase it for the next so many years, I'm just gonna keep it there, because that's gonna get us so much, so much, so much, and it's gonna make us be a preventive county instead of, uh-oh, we need this now, and where are we gonna get the money? By getting a little bit of money set aside for, you know, things that need to be coming. You know, I'm looking towards the future here for 6,000 residents at this place, 700 there, 400 there. You know, those people coming in are gonna want fire protection. I, as a resident, currently want fire protection, and I'm sure the people in the audience want fire protection. You know, that's one of the necessities we need to provide. So that's why I said either the 175 or the 150, I could agree with without any problem.
Commissioner Kennard?
I'm no insurance expert, but I don't think there's one thing in this proposal that's gonna reduce your ISO rating.
Not mine.
It's, putting 3 people on a truck is not gonna reduce anybody's rating.
Yeah, well,
I don't believe so. I don't believe that's the case at all.
All right, I've lost where I'm at. Okay, if the board has nothing else, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address the board? Going once, going twice. Open to the public is closed. Board, is there any final comments? I'll just make the final comment. I'm nervous. I'm very nervous about this budget season. I know that this past year, it, you know, with the additional exemption that was being floated out there, that would have been $6 million out of our general fund coffers. And until we get a little closer, I have no idea what's going to happen in this session. I mean, there's talk that the legislative session will, call for the governor's hand and present a budget before the end of session, which gives them 7 days. They may wait till the end of the session, and then he's got till July 1 to sign off on the budget. I think right now this is a roll of the dice where we're going, and I'm very cautious about what we commit to this early in the game. So that's my 2 cents. And if there's no other comments, we'll adjourn this portion. All right. Ugh. I'm waiting for the clerk here.
Chair, we're ready.
All right. All right, we're going to call to order the workshop for the proposed rate changes for the landfill. Board, if you would so indulge, I don't think that there's a need to do another invocation and pledge, but we will have the clerk do the roll call.
This is a public workshop for the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners this 8th day of April 2025. In attendance are Chair Rebecca Bays, First Vice Chair Diana Finnegan, Second Vice Chair Janet Barrick, Commissioner Jeff Kennard, Commissioner Holly Davis, County Administrator Steve Howard, and County Attorney Denise A. Diamond-Lynn.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is B1, which is the solid waste rate study workshop. We're to provide direction on whether to pursue the adoption of scenario 1 or scenario 2. B is provide direction on whether to implement an annual index beginning in fiscal year 2031. And the presentation will be by Carlton Hall, the Public Works Director, Joshua Yantz, the Solid Waste Operations Manager, and Trevor McCarthy from Raffles? Raffles. All right.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners, Carlton Hall, Citrus County Public Works Director. So the reason we're here today is to do the rate study for solid waste. Give you a little history. I don't think there's ever been a rate study done for solid waste. There's been some business plans, some things that they've looked at in years and years and years ago. As far as solid waste goes, they are enterprise fund. All the funds that they collect there at the scale for the charges for trash are what they use to operate the landfill for the county. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what's needed in the future. And also, I want to thank Heather, who happened to be here for the fire assessment rate study, and she is going to be helping us with a few things for solid waste as well, as far as some changes that we're looking to make. One of those changes is the removal of a commercial assessment that the county has, and we can discuss that a little further. It's in the study as we go through it. And then we also have expansion that we have at the solid waste facility that are coming and needed in the very near future. There's a slide that I'd like to go to kind of give you a little background. The area on the right is our current 80-acre facility. And the county has a lease with forestry and DEP for that site, and that is pretty much an open-ended lease. That lease doesn't end until we don't need the facility anymore and we turn it back over. The county is required to maintain that facility for 30 years after the landfill is closed. And those funds to accomplish that are also saved and collected as part of the charges there at the landfill. The area with all of the red on the left is a 60-acre site that the county was leasing from DEP and forestry. And that lease ended in 2021, and they decided that they did not want to renew the lease with us. They wanted us to purchase the land. We did some checks on that land. We did appraisals. It came in over the threshold for the state for us to be able to just buy it outright without taking that land out to a public auction, for that land, and we didn't want to go that route. So we're currently and have been working with DEP and forestry for the last year and a half to try to work out a scenario where we're going to do a land swap. We're going to find some property that the forestry is interested in. The county or solid waste would buy that property, and then we would trade for the 60 acres. And the reason this is so important is the future expansion of solid waste requires the use of that 60 acres. Now, we're currently still maintaining it. We have some of our recycling stuff there. The school board has their firing range there. They have a lease with DEP as well. And so we're maintaining that property even though we don't have a lease with it. And we're eagerly working to try to push this deal through for a land swap. I spoke to Diane McKenzie with DEP this morning, and so far we haven't gotten any word back from the Department of Agriculture on that swap and whether we can move forward with it or not. But we're looking forward to a decision very soon. So as we go through.
Excuse me, Commissioner Finnegan.
I know we've talked about this. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the dates. So once or if that occurs and we gain those 60 acres and we can expand, that takes our capacity to 2045?
Pretty much. Right now, we have about 2 years left on the cell we're currently using, cell 3. Once that cell is at capacity, we have our cell 4A that we are finishing construction on as we speak. I think today's board meeting, we're extending that completion date into July just so we have the time to get our permitting together. So once we move out of cell 3, we move into 4A. We have about 8 years, possibly 9, just depends on how the growth expands. So 8 or 9 years in 4A. And then, of course, once that 60-acre site becomes available, we'll be able to move into construction for our 4B cell, which will give us another 10 years or so.
So forgive me, because I know we had discussed this before, but just reviewing everything again last night, more new questions popped in my head. So because that will be quite expensive for solid waste, and then I know after that we've hit capacity, so we'll have to have this transfer station, right? And then people will bring their garbage and then it gets transferred out. Is this the most economical way for Citrus County to extend to 2045 and then use the transfer station? Or would it be more economical for us to take that money and just build the transfer station and be at capacity and then, not prolong it for the next 20 years? I'm not sure. What's those numbers look like?
I would say, and I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but what I've been told in the past is a transfer station would triple the rates that we're going to be proposing today.
Interesting.
Having to haul the garbage out of the county and make an arrangement to bring that garbage somewhere else could triple the rates. Now, we have, in my conversations with forestry and DEP in the past, is looking at expanding our current site even more into forestry land so that we could have another cell, maybe cell 5. And I was told that's probably not going to happen. I know for a new landfill, it could take up to 10 years for permitting for a new landfill. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this future expansion and what's needed. We're going to look forward to the future and try to get an idea of what we need to work on right now and save for right now. We have been working on this for almost a year and a half. I know I've had different discussions with Reftelis. We've gone through the numbers in the study. We also noticed some inaccuracies on some of the cities and what they were paying, and that's going to be brought out in the study as well. To get us started, I'm going to ask Joshua Yance with Citrus County Solid Waste to come up and give us some ideas on the funding portion of this and what we need to look to for the future. And after that, Mr. Henry Thomas with Reftelis is going to come up and present the study. And once the board has a chance to hear all of this, we're all here for questions. And then at the end, hopefully we can get a consensus from the board on a scenario 1 or 2. You'll see the differences between the two, and then we can move forward to putting this to a public hearing. I'll introduce Joshua Yance.
Oh, good morning, Board. My name is Joshua Yance. I'm the Operations Manager for the Division of Solid Waste. I did want to touch back just a little bit on this transfer station. So with this new expansion, we are looking at building this new CSA in order to become a transfer station. Now, one of the nice things about our expansions right now is we actually have one of the deepest landfills in Florida. So when it comes to like economical cost and things like that, we're actually able to go much deeper than a lot of the other counties and things. And if you do decide to transfer out, you're always at the mercy of the other county's rates. Whatever they decide is what you pay. If they run into hurricanes or storms or disasters or anything like that, we're going to see our rates based accordingly depending on what they're going to charge us. Sorry, I'm having a good morning. Okay, so I did want to touch a little bit on the other expenditures for the landfill. Now, this study is based on the next 5 years, and the majority of our expenditures do come from these primary CIP projects that you're looking at. But I do want to mention, just for those that may not be aware and those that are listening, that the landfill does also fund a large portion of other activities as well. So any recycling events or things like that, all of our recycling, scrap metal, fluorescent tubes, our hazardous waste program, those are all funded by the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, along with our Adopt a Highway crew and our Adopt a Highway program and our litter crews. I just want to mention that so you guys are aware. We are going to be looking at 2 scenarios over the next 5 years, and there'll also be the opportunity to implement an index fund for future increase if you'd like to do that. And with that, I'll present Henry Thomas with Reftelis. Trevor McCarthy couldn't be with us here today. Sorry. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Joshua.
Good morning.
Good morning. Henry Thomas, Senior Vice President, Reftelis Financial Consultants. I was involved in this study, but the person that really ran the study had some family health issues, so he apologizes. Just by way of introduction and background, I've worked with the county now for over 30 years with the water wastewater folks. So I've been your rate consultant on the water wastewater side for many years now, and other projects that have come along for that enterprise. Am I clicking here? Okay. Aha. You said it was small. Trying to get oriented to this screen. So basically, we've taken a comprehensive approach to the enterprise, looked at the different cash flows and needs, and come up with a rate analysis that in terms of the funding includes 2 options we'd like to talk to you about. So the objectives of this is to balance the revenues, which include your tipping fees, your MSBU revenues, your self-haul fees, and you balance that with the revenue requirements. Primarily operating expenses make up about 65% of the overall costs. Any debt and reserves that you need, for example, the land closure reserves that we put in annually, as well as the payment for the future expansion if we choose to do that. So the plan is to fully fund the enterprise. We want to make sure it's sustainable into the future. The major driver of this is the cell expansion and other capital, including the capital associated with the citizens area that you're putting in. So the other thing we're going to recommend is the first few years here, the rate increases are going to be in excess of inflation because it's been a while and costs are moving forward in terms of that new cell. So we're going to recommend that once we get through this first series of rate increases, if you adopt them, that you consider in the future applying an index to the rates. And the reason we recommend that is not to, so that you lose control of it, because you would still have control over the process, but to give you a mechanism to have small annual increases in rates rather than waiting like we've done and then having large increases. And so that mechanism of that indexing could serve you well going forward, just to make sure that each and every year you make some minor adjustment to keep up with your costs. With respect to rate design issues, one of the major features of this is to eliminate the commercial disposal fee. And so when we redesign all the rates, for example, on the commercial tipping fees, we're going to have to increase those fees to make up for the loss in the disposal or the commercial assessment. So when we look at the funding requirements, this is a bar graph that just shows the three major components of costs. The lower portion of the bar is the operating costs, annual costs that you budget for each year, about 65% of the total costs stack. When we look at the transfers to the landfill closure, that's about $700,000 a year, or about 5% on average of your annual costs. And then in terms of the capital improvement program, which is the portion of the bar at the top, the funding of that, is we have a $55.7 million CIP over the next 5 years. And to fund that would be about 30% of your annual costs. The operating expenses give you a little disclosure on assumptions we made, so you can see how we've taken your 2025 operating budget and projected it into the future to determine future rate needs. We've assumed labor costs at 5% a year, health insurance slightly higher at about 8%, repair and maintenance at 3%, general inflation 2.2%. That's pretty conservative nowadays, but that's kind of the long run inflation that we've been facing. And then when we look at the staffing, and because there are some new positions incorporated into the operating expenses, it's running about 5.7% annually of an increase annually in your overall operating expenses. Capital improvement plan, $55.7 million we mentioned. That includes allowances for inflation. Obviously, these costs are increasing over time. The major projects include the new citizen service area. That's an $8.9 million project. The 4B landfill expansion, that's $22.3 million, and this is targeted for the construction to be completed in 2031. In addition, we have ongoing heavy equipment purchases for loaders, compactors, excavators, and then there's about a $650,000 allowance built into your budget and into the capital plan for minor ongoing capital outlay, trucks, fleet replacement, equipment that's needed, that's minor equipment. So in order to fund this, as I mentioned, we have two scenarios. And we're going to show you what the increase in revenues we need to raise to pay for the projects under the two scenarios. But I will say that those increases, when we talk about them, aren't necessarily the rate increases, because certain components in this fee structure we're not increasing. For example, the residential assessment is going to stay at $27. The fee for self-haul is going to stay at $160. So while some fees are going to go up to achieve the revenue target, others won't. And those that are going up are probably going up a little higher than that target. And some of them are a little behind, and we're going to try to balance and increase them to catch up with other categories of service or customer types. And that one in particular is the municipal agreements that we have, where the municipalities bring their waste to the landfill. Right now, they're paying significantly less than your residential customers, than your commercial customers. And while we don't want to put an undue burden on them, we want to, over time, the tipping fee should be the tipping fee. everybody, the garbage being brought to the landfill, whether it's from the cities or from your own, the haulers within the county, it's the same. So ultimately, the tipping fees should be pretty close. And we're gonna, over time, make that correction. But this scenario, what we did here to mitigate the impact of funding that cell expansion is in the first scenario, we fund the cell expansion through accruing annual revenues that we built into the rates. And as you can see, the capital expenditure in 2031 is a very large number. So basically, we're saving up to pay for the construction of that landfill over the next 5 years. Just to demonstrate some of the benefit, and I know, historically you haven't used a lot of debt in this system, but we do have a plan where we show that 50% of the landfill, if we fund it with debt, and 50% we fund PAYGO, that cuts the amount that we have to save up over the next 5 years in half. And it does allow for the payment of the landfill then to occur over the future life of the landfill. As we continue to grow, there'll be more customers to help share those debt costs. And so it does work out to lower rates, but it does imply some risk and it does increase the county's debt. So those are the two scenarios.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Kennard.
Sure.
Yeah, the scenario of paying for this construction with debt and then stringing the payments out over the remaining life of the landfill, if what we've heard was the most that we're going to get out of all of this is 20 years, you're repaying all of that debt, or 50% would be in debt?
Yeah, we've assumed a 20-year note.
Okay. All
So
right.
that it matches the life of the landfill.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we weren't going into that time
Because we
period.
don't want a pancake.
Right.
We don't want to start adding new landfills that we haven't paid for the other landfill yet. right?
Correct,
So that's the trick to make that work.
Okay.
But, just like in your utility system, sometimes debt is good. It's not always good, but it's certainly if you're a homeowner, debt and types of debt are bad in some views. But I think for utilities and systems like the solid waste system with long-term assets, debt can be a useful tool to manage rates.
Excuse me, Commissioner Finnegan?
Something Commissioner Kennard said, I just got tripped up with the graph.
Okay,
So,
which one now?
either one, because they're to 2035.
All right,
So
hold-
whatever we do, it seems like if we don't do the rate increase by 2035, we're going to need to take out debt. But I checked with Carlton in the beginning, and this would last to 2045. But then Commissioner Kennard said 20 years. So 2035 to 2045 is 10 years.
Okay, so 2035 to 2045, is that the beginning of the next expansion, 2045?
I had asked initially if when we did the land swapping could expand for this extra, is that to 2045? And the answer I got was yes.
So the land swap itself is in progress right now.
Right.
Our current landfill expansions right now allow us to go to about 27 plus 8 years. So that puts us at 35, I believe. We will be stuck at 2035 until the landfill citizen service area moves and we go into that phase 4B expansion. At that point, we would be expanded until 2045. Am I answering that correctly?
So then it's 10 years. So the expansion will last Citrus County 10 years.
For the phase 4B expansion, yes, miss.
So Commissioner Kennard, you're talking about debt. It's for 10 years, not
And-
20 years.
And
Sorry, it's 15.
15, yeah,
The
that was the
assumption
other.
we made on the
there
debt was 15.
The dump, yes.
That's
All right, the math isn't adding up, gentlemen.
No, it is a 15-year note that is
The
assumed
note
in
is
here.
15, okay.
Yes, it's a 15-year note that's assumed here. That's what's in the rates.
Right. So we're finishing up that 4A expansion as we speak. It's paid for. It's paid for out of the revenues of solid waste. And that's going to give us that 8-year window, plus we have a few years left on cell 3. That's a 10-year window. So the money that would be borrowed would be helping pay for half of the expansion for 4B, which wouldn't take place until 2031. That's when we would want to start that construction of 4B. To do that, of course, we have to have the 60-acre land swap that was brought up in the very beginning, which we're working through with DEP and Forestry to get that through, and which would allow us to expand. 4B would give us another 10 years past that.
So a 15-year note, 10-year capacity.
Well, we
At that
wouldn't,
point.
look, we wouldn't borrow any money for 4B if we don't get the 60 acres. The 60-acre land swap is key to having that additional 10-year
If you don't get the land swap, then we need to build the transfer station sooner than later.
Correct.
Well, that honestly, I mean, I want to hear the rest of the presentation. That's what I'm leaning toward for two reasons. We don't know what rates or what that's going to look like in 2035. And the second reason is how many times has a board said, oh, they pushed it off, they left it for us, it would have been better if they would have done it this way. That means we would just be pushing this off to another board to deal with possibly high interest rates, an extra $3.5 million, or if the interest rates are higher, it could be a lot more money to the citizens that are living here at that time. So, but I'm interested for you to keep going for all the possibilities. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair,
Commissioner Davis?
while we're on that topic, just a point of clarification, when would the borrowing begin? Wouldn't it begin around 2030?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a 15-year note, and it's going to end at the same time as the lifetime of the 60-acre cell, which is 4B, right? So
That's approximately what we're trying to
I
achieve.
just wanted to make sure, just to clarify with everyone.
So in the pay-as-you-go scenario, we'll call it, where we're going to fund it over the next 5 years, in order to have enough money by 2031 to complete that construction project, we have to front-load the rates a little more than we'd like to. We'd like to level it out, but every time we did it, it doesn't produce enough funding at a reasonable level. The proposed increases in revenue that we need to achieve to equate to all this funding requirement in the early years is 11.5%. So overall revenues have to go up 11.5%. And then once we get a substantial amount of money in that fund to pay for that next cell, we move down to something near inflation. That's the 3.65% in the last 3 years. Now, the positive thing is that we avoid that interest cost. And with interest costs and issuance, which, again, the debt principal would be equal to pay-go amounts. That's the primary investment. But the interest cost and the issuance cost over that period of time is about $3.6 million. You're adding to the cost, but you're not recovering them as quickly, which is why there's a rate differential. It does generate cash flows that if you continue at these rate levels, you should be able to theoretically continue to expand on a pay-as-you-go basis, because now the rates have a significant amount of capital built into them to take care of cell expansion now and in the future. It may require some adjustment, but you're going to be a long ways there to continue this pay-as-you-go program. Again, the downside is that there's a greater rate increase initially. So the outcome of this, if you look to the chart on the right, just shows you that if we take that chart I showed you earlier with the operating expenses at the bottom and in blue, and then the capital funding and transfers and other transfers to closure funds taken into account, and we plot that against existing rates, the existing rates are that dashed red line. So you can see that we're significantly underfunded as time goes on. Also, if you do the rate increases that would equate to an increase in revenues as we've proposed, then that's the dashed blue line, and you can see the attempt is to match the revenues to the cost. So again, unrestricted cash balances are kept in funds 401, 403, and 405. And as you can see, we're pretty healthy right now, but we're spending those monies on these projects. And if you look at the cash balances, we did put in there a minimum reserve target of 120 days of O&M. That would be the absolute minimum we think you should go down to in your reserves. But if you look in 2031 and 2032, when we make that project expenditure for that cell expansion, we take our fund balance down to the minimum level. Now, it'll begin to build back up, but that one big expenditure will diminish the cash. And, you know, we've obviously been saving it. We don't need this kind of cash absent the landfill expansion. So that's scenario one. Scenario two, if we do fund 50% of the cell expansion with debt, and again, I think we, as a staff and as your consultant, I think we tend to agree on the pay-as-you-go approach. But here you could see the revenue increases more level, and at about 6.5% a year, we didn't have to increase total revenues to be able to fund it and use debt. So again, we try to align it with the life of the asset, and again, you know, there is interest cost, but you have a significant reduction in near-term rates relative to the first scenario. So again, the same charts to the right shows how, again, when you use debt, there would be some debt service, and you see that at the very tail end of the chart in the orange at the very top. That's the new debt coming online, and the red dash line and the blue dash line are also existing and proposed revenues. When you look at the impact of cash reserves here, we do use up cash reserves because, again, we're still going to fund half of this cell expansion with cash. But again, just a scenario that's going to give you a little more immediate relief, and in the long run, probably isn't a lot different in terms of total costs. Oh, come on. Did I do that right? Okay. So then the other thing we wanted to talk about is, you know, we're aware that, you know, for many years you did not even change rates. Recently you have some adjustments because you had to do some ad hoc increases to keep up with inflation and cost levels that you're experiencing. But we, again, would like you to consider in the future within your rate ordinance to have an index clause. And well, while if we're increasing the tipping fees at the levels we're proposing in scenario one, for example, that's well beyond inflation. So this really is intended as a policy issue for once we get through this phase of paying for that expansion and we don't have the same kinds of cost pressures, just to give you the ability to increase rates annually if you'd like. We don't like CPI for this kind of stuff. These costs don't necessarily follow the cost of groceries and consumer costs. So the index that we use when we do this in our solid waste industry is the Garbage and Trash Collection Index. It's essentially an index of rate increases in solid waste costs. So you'd be pacing your increase, if you use this index in the future, you'd be pacing it to the overall increase that the industry's seeing in rates. Again, not a perfect match with your costs. It's always better to analyze your own costs, but it does give you another solution to manage rates. And then you do maintain, even if you have the index, you decide when to implement it or not to implement it. So it's not an automatic clause that takes the decision-making out of your hands. So, going the wrong way. Somehow I'm going backwards. You help me out here. I'm thinking I'm going one direction, I'm going the other. All right, so with respect to rate designs, the ultimate product of this analysis is a set of tipping fees by customer category. So if you want to go to the next slide, just here, currently, your residential MSBU is $27 per residential unit per year. So you charge an assessment of $27 per residential unit. And in addition, the haulers do pay tipping fees as well, but commercial disposal fee, that's the one we would like to eliminate. is $1.25 per cubic yard. So that's based on container sizes, based on discussions with the commercial customers that bring waste to the landfill. They would rather just see a single tipping fee. There's really no need to bifurcate it into two pieces. And someday in the future, you may even consider eliminating the residential assessment and just go to a tipping fee there as well. But for now, that's something people are comfortable with, and we aren't not increasing that assessment. So the tipping fee for municipal solid waste right now is $40 a ton, and that's for residential and certified haulers. Commercial and non-certified are paying $80 a ton. The city interlocal agreement provides that they pay $44 a ton. The annual residential self-haul program is $160 per vehicle per year. You get an allowance of 8 bags, 30-gallon bags of garbage and yard waste a week. And then there's a transaction fee of $5 a visit. That's for self-haul pass holders, certified haulers, and exempt. The objectives is, one, to eliminate the commercial disposal fee, our assessment, develop an equitable solid waste MSW tipping fee among customer classes while recognizing this cost recovery change on the commercial disposal fee. So residential or certified haulers collecting assessed residences garbage, commercial or non-assessed are the classes, and then the city interlocal customers. We would recover the residential assessed customer share of costs through tipping fees and the existing MSBU. So again, we're not increasing the 27, but the tipping fees that go along with that will go up. And then there's a number of miscellaneous fees, and it's really difficult to drill down and cost base all of them. So what we did was we applied system average increases to those miscellaneous fees and charges. Okay, so just to look at the effective charge per ton of garbage based on existing rates. So it's a little tricky to look at what it's really costing, but let's take the residential assessed customers. The assessment revenues right now on the $27 assessment are $2.1 million. Tipping fee revenues that would be proposed in this rate design are $2.4 million. That's $4.5 million, and it's roughly 60,696 tons, and that equates to a tipping fee of $74.64 per ton. Right now, city customers are paying $44 a ton. Commercial certified and assessed customers, we have the commercial assessment revenues of $729, which would get rolled in. Then we've got tipping fee revenues of $791. That would give us a total of $1.5 million in revenues, divided by 19,786 tons is a tipping fee equivalent of $76.86 per ton. So that's very comparable to the residential. The non-certified haulers and non-assessed haulers are paying $80, so they're paying a little higher. And as I mentioned before, the city customers are paying by far the least amount for tipping. So we've got the scenarios here again that just shows you that what the two rate increases would equate to in terms of total revenue, but the rate increases in the tipping fees will give you more detail on, and you can see that they're going to vary around these percentages because of those charges that we didn't increase and held constant. So would you go to the next chart, please? So this just shows you over the next 5 years what the proposed fee would look like. As you can see here, we've started with the MSBU. We've kept it the same in 2026. Now, in order to keep the tipping fees reasonable, the question is, in this case, what we did was we assumed you'd eventually increase the MSBU rate. And that's certainly something that we can talk about and doesn't necessarily have to be built in, but we did it in order to help levelize the rates among the customer classes. And again, you can see that we assumed a $35 assessment for the MSBU residential customers.
Excuse me 1 minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Finnegan?
I'm sorry, what is the difference between commercial and commercial non-certified, non-assessed? Like, how, can you differentiate that for me?
So apologies. So the commercial rate is specific to certified haulers that would be hauling residential trash that's already been assessed. Those haulers are already paying that. The citizens are already paying that $27 MSBU. So their waste that's hauled in gets brought down to that $40 an hour, $40 a ton rate. The $80 would be specific to just businesses that are bringing in waste that are not paying that MSBU.
So when you talk about the ones that are lower, it's the businesses getting the tiny little postcard,
Yes, correct.
but
Those are the
that's
one-
going away.
So yes, that would be.
So then everybody would be now
The fourth rate down.
non-assessed.
Correct. The previously assessed commercial, that's why it jumps from $40 to $80. It's in the removal of that commercial assessment. It has to make up those funds somewhere. In the previous slide, it shown it's around $76 a ton. So this brings it up to that $80 a ton without the commercial assessment.
And for those watching, because it's a thin little piece of paper, I pay it
Yeah.
all the time. It's that big, but in the mail, it has a perforated line for like the part that you pay. I'm telling you, it's probably no bigger than this. And so one of our private business staff person, I got this as a bill, like, sorry, don't know where the rest of it is, and this gets lost in the mail. Then they have to spend money to type out a letter and put it in an envelope. So it really is, you're probably spending twice as much money to collect half the money. It really is insane. So this is a
That's
fantastic
correct.
idea.
There is a lot of additional expenses, and there is also the fact that if somebody doesn't pay that commercial assessment, the hauler will then stop picking up their waste, and there's this long delay in between them working that out, whether or not they paid their certified hauler or whether they paid their commercial assessment. And that leads to delays in pickups as well. So, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So then, again, you can look at the rate path, for example, the city haulers at $44. Again, the idea is by 2030, we're trying to get equity between the city haulers and your county residents that are paying for landfill services, both residential and commercial. And you can see that as we go over time, by 28 and 29, the tipping fees for these categories are pretty much the same. We did also, just as a matter of disclosure, because if we don't do if we don't increase that assessment from $27 to $35 for residents, then we would have to go back and look at those tipping fees for that category. Also, we did assume some increases over time in the self-haul pass. So we've got that in there. And again, we're looking for your direction on that, but we've got some increases going forward in the self-haul pass as well, and small increases in the transaction fee. So again, the next scenario on the next slide just are the same rates, but that debt-funded scenario. So again, same pattern, overall rates are lower over the entire period. And then this is just a comparison of all the fees on one table, existing, scenario 1 and scenario 2 by FY30. So you can see here side by side what everybody's paying now and what they would be paying throughout the next, by the end of the next 5 years under the proposed fees. And for example, your commercial assessment goes away. The residential MSBU, we did increase and showing that increased. The residential certified haulers, the fee goes from 40 up to 54 or 58, depending on the scenario. And again, you can see that under all these rate categories, scenario 2 is slightly lower than scenario 1. Let's go to the next one. This just shows you what the annual residential disposal charges are in comparison with other counties. The survey average is $93. Under scenario 1 in FY27, the county would be at $73.30 for residential disposal. And right now, the county under scenario 2 would be at 6639. Right now, you're at 5818. So you can see you're at the lower end of this comparison, including Collier, Levy, Sarasota, Hernando, Marion, and other situated counties that have landfills. So the next one is the tipping fees themselves, solid waste tipping fees. And here the survey average is 6103. I know there's a number of these communities that are doing rate studies, but you can see the proposed fees for the county are there, starting with the red bar, that's the existing, and then the orange bars show the two different scenarios. And you can see that while you're not the low end, you're certainly not at the high end of the tipping fee comparison. So if we're going to do the cell expansion, whether we do debt or not, the current rates are not sufficient to cover both operating and capital projects, including that new citizens area, which is a significant investment as well in this plan. The elimination of the commercial assessment requires the adjustment of the fees so that we fully recover that portion of the costs along with and included in the tipping fee. And right now, the city tipping fee is not recovering their fair share of costs. You know, I believe, have we had any discussions with the city yet? Cities?
Yeah, I had a conversation with both City of Crystal River and City of Inverness explaining the situation to them. We also sent them the rates in both scenarios so they could see the increases that will be coming, and I didn't hear another word from them, so no complaints so far.
Question, any idea how Charlotte and Manatee County are keeping their rates low? Can you come to the mic just because it's recorded? Sorry.
Dan Sherlock, Director of Solid Waste. We were curious to look at that ourselves, and we looked into it. Charlotte County back in the early 70s bought 640 acres of land. So their expansion there's no cost other than just maintaining the cell. Plus they have curbside pickup for the entire county. So those two things have generated money for them to grow. But that's one of the reasons how they kept it is they've already owned the 640 acres since the 70s.
The one thing about solid waste enterprises is the business looks different from community to community, and whether you do the collection or not, or just the disposal. So that's kind of could play into it. But again, you know, obviously if you buy all your future needs many years ago, it's going to be big savings.
So one question is, has there been an assessment in theory what it cost us to not have universal collection?
I'm sorry, if you wouldn't mind repeating that one more time.
So we don't require people to have a hauler, and we don't have universal hauling, so we have multiple trucks, companies running around.
Correct.
I mean, in my opinion, so we have 4 different companies, for the sake of argument, running down the same residential road, which is beating up our roads, and as opposed to having it contracted out and having pickup.
Okay, so I will say, what you're talking about is universal, it's franchising, universal collection. This board did see that back in 2021 as a board item, and it was shut down 5-0. It was a 3-year process where we sent notifications to the haulers and things like that. And I think what it came down to was when you go to universal collection like that, you are forcing citizens to have a hauler at a certain rate that goes through their taxes. Now that rate would typically be much higher. So like with a lot of the comparisons of these counties, and unfortunately, when it comes to solid waste disposal and things like that, for these different counties, when we're comparing rates, it's all apples to oranges. We do have different programs that we offer here, such as our recycling programs, our alley where people can go drop things off. Other counties aren't always offering that. They may only have a transfer station, or they may only have a solid waste facility. So the rates are going to be different. I did want to touch back on your Manatee County comment. They do use debt to service, or debt. They use debt to fund capital is what they do. So they are in debt for some of their CIP projects. So that's probably why their rates are a little bit lower than ours right now. Now that may change over the coming years. But as far as the universal collection goes, We don't know what that rate would look like. It would be completely based on what the haulers would bid in at. And if you were going to do that again, I believe it's at least a 3-year process. And there is a specific requirement now, and maybe I could be corrected on what that is exactly, but you'd have to pay the haulers out several years' worth of their revenue if you're going to select one of them. Does that answer? Sorry. I know that's probably a little more than you asked for.
So when Charlotte, are you saying that they do their own hauling?
No, Charlotte, so we're not exactly familiar with Charlotte County. Charlotte County is much, I think they're south of Tampa, but they do have a lot more, they're a lot more packed in than we are. They have a lot more citizens and they produce a lot more waste. So you can actually get kind of a lower cost to residential home as well.
All right,
And then
thank you.
you noted here that Sarasota also is funding their
Yeah.
cell expansions.
Yeah, I did have notes as well on
Okay,
Sarasota.
all right,
Yeah,
thank you.
no problem.
So as far as recommendations, we believe you should consider adopting one of the two scenarios. Either one's going to provide sufficient funding. It just depends on your risk tolerance for debt and how you want to do business at the landfill in terms of the future financing. We do believe you should consider including in the ordinance the option for an indexing provision that would begin after fiscal year 2031 or after 2030, allow you to use it to keep pace with inflation in your operating expenses and other related capital costs, and that you should probably be doing a rate study to look at the overall system condition financially every 3 to 5 years, or if there's major significant changes. Now, the steps that we're going to go to in the future here for the rate study is once we get some direction from you, and we'd like the choice of how we're going to fund it, that's a real policy issue. If you give us some direction there, the next thing we will do is prepare for you a final report with these recommendations in it. So you'll have, in addition to the briefing, you'll have a report with a lot more depth in terms of the analytical tables and things like that. But we didn't want to have a report with, a bunch of tables that are options that we wanted you to consider before we move forward. I think that's it.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Kennard.
The issue right out of the gate that I have with the two proposals is that they both assume that we get the lease on this 60 acres from the state, and I don't think that's guaranteed. In fact, I think it's a long way from guaranteed that that's going to happen. So I would have liked to have seen a third scenario. Do we have room with the existing land that we control to build a transfer station? And
We do. Instead of building that cell 4B, we would have no choice at that point but to put in a transfer station.
Okay.
Talking to both forestry and DEP, they are more than willing and wanting to move forward with the land swap. For some reason, that 60 acres was put into a conservation land lease, and it never should have been because it is a retired landfill. And so they're looking to right that wrong from many years ago, and they're on board with it. It's just a matter of going through the hoops, the federal hoops. So the Department of Agriculture gives a thumbs up, and then it goes to their ARC committee for the land swap. And at that point, we move forward. So either way, we're going to have to spend the funds on 4B expansion. We're going to have to spend the funds on a transfer station at that location. And then, of course, at that point, we'd have to do another rate study and what that would look like to transfer our garbage out of the county.
Thank you. I would like to see a scenario where perhaps the haulers could direct haul to neighboring communities, to either the heart of Central Florida for the east side of our county, possibly to Hernando County, direct haul from the southern part of our county, rather than bringing it to a transfer station and incurring those additional costs to hauling trash to the center part of the county, through the transfer station, and back out of the county again, and see what those numbers look like. We've got one cell that's nearly completed at this point, if that cell sits empty until our neighboring landfills are full, then we've still got another 8 years to figure out what we're going to do at that point. If we fill this one up, if we fill up the remaining capacity that we have, or are going to construct, then at that point, the last step is to build a transfer station. And then we are at the mercy of surrounding or neighboring landfills, or maybe at that point, it's time to start talking to, wish I could talk, start talking to Pasco County about incinerating it or any of the waste to electricity facilities. Then the costs do go up significantly because we've used up all of our space at that point. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I'm just saying, I think that we should look at going to the transfer station option sooner rather than later, if that's an option without tripling the costs of hauling and disposal.
We could definitely look into it. It's another scenario to put some numbers together on if you'd like us to bring back that scenario.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I know currently we try to stop the county's trash from going outside of the county, but in this instance, I could see where you're coming from and the cost benefit of that.
Yeah, at some point, it's going to leave the county. So, I understand that until this point, it was funding the operations out there, but at some point, and that some point is getting closer and closer and closer. Sooner rather than later, we have an opportunity possibly to control our costs, I guess, to look back in time, there was a point in time where Marion County bought, 20 years of airspace over in Central Florida landfill for a song. Now, whether or not that was just an error in the contract price, but I want to say they bought it for like $6 a ton or something crazy like that, and they bought 20 years of airspace. Going back, maybe we should have done the same thing, but looking, right now may give us an opportunity to negotiate something like that and lower our long-term costs for disposing of our solid waste.
Okay.
Carl, we had the Metro forecast presentation, I believe it was last board meeting. So if we're at 87,693 households right now, and the prediction for 2045 is 115,500 households, and there's also, they gave the community shopping centers and the industrial demand. Was all of that taken into consideration with the projected growth that's coming?
It was, yes. Percentage of increase for the growth.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because most of our growth is supposed to happen by 2035.
Yeah, there's significant growth built into the tonnage.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Barrett?
Eventually, things are gonna disappear. We're not gonna be able to have any space in our county, correct? I could think back in time, and this is 2045 you're talking about. Didn't we used to talk about 2050, back around 2010? And we weren't worried about this or that? Because I want to know, how many years have we been trying to get this 60 acres? Okay?
I know that when Mr. Brock was Assistant Public Works Director, in meetings that I was in at the facilities at the time, there was talks of land swaps and getting additional acreage. And they were looking at getting the 60 acres that they already had a lease on and an additional amount of property to add on to the landfill.
And we've been trying for over 10 years to get this 60 acres, if I'm not,
Not
or
necessarily
close to it.
the 60, but they were trying to get additional land behind
Right.
the existing landfill, yes.
And we're not getting it any faster than we were.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked about going to the universal garbage collection, which I was for, but then some of the commissioners were a little skittish and decided not to go with it. I live in a place where we have garbage trucks come down our street 4 days a week. I also live in a place where, because we didn't go to universal, my garbage in the last 3 years has gone up 3 times, and I've had to change garbage carrier 3 times due to that fact. So I know that, residents were not happy, okay? this, I don't know, it blows my mind that we're gonna be actually out of space by 2045 now. But I don't think you're actually taking into consideration the growth of population or the commercial. Because we have from 2010 to now doubled. Okay? And we plan on doing a whole lot more. So the thing is, I don't think the garbage is gonna last to 2045. I don't think our landfill is gonna be there till 2045. You have to know, do we have that 60 acres or not? And to try and push to get that 60 acres should be number one on your priority list.
It has been for the last year and a half. And I've even heard from Mr. Howard that the one thing that keeps him up at night is solid waste and the landfill and the space that we have.
But that's 18 months.
Mhm.
And 18 months, and it's not moving any closer.
Oh, we've gone a long way in 18 months, trust me. A lot further than we were
they
when
were-
I came to Public Works.
They were trying to move this dial in 2017 based on the commissioner's outstanding list, but it's interesting when you got to try to get something that somebody else owns and has. So you got to make sure you got both parties negotiating, trying to get that to the finish line. And I do say that. I say a lot of people say what keeps you up at night, your land. I've actually had multiple landfills, places I've been. Actually, I own a home in Charlotte County. We just talked about Charlotte County. I pay taxes for my mother. She's widowed. So I know what they do in that neck of the woods as well. But we're doing everything that we can possibly at a staff level to do our best to get that. But that's one thing I always say about citizens. Everybody has waste, no matter how your age in this county, everybody gets, does that. You're also at the mercy of other counties as well. So that's important to make sure you're working with them. We found that out during the hurricane season and stuff like that. So there's a lot there to get to the finish line on.
I even reached out to Mr. Toy and spoke to him a little bit about the solid waste and the 60 acres and the process that we've been through so far. Sent him all the emails so he can see the progress that's been made in the last 18 months and asked him to reach out and see if he can't push things along a little bit in Tallahassee for us. And he's working on that as we speak.
But one of the other things you're not considering is we have really been pushing for increase in tourism. And we've had an increase in tourism. Tourists actually do produce garbage.
They sure do.
So if we're adding residents, adding tourists, adding businesses, trying to get some industrial going, do you really feel that 2045 is when we will close it? Or would it be closer to 2040?
It depends. I mean, we can show the increases that they've put into the report. Once we kind of narrow things down, which way we're going, the report's going to show you that expansion increase that they've factored into the landfill and when that actual date of being at capacity would be. So you'll see those numbers once the report comes
Well,
out.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Kennard that we need to get with other counties and start sending our waste to other counties.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Finnegan.
try to bring this to a wrap here. Madam Attorney, Commissioner Kennard brought up a scenario 3 that, as one other commissioner, I believe is a very prudent thought. Then we, if that possibly could work, if we wouldn't be beholden at any point in time to other counties. We could get that transfer station. If something doesn't work out or we have a hiccup, we have a backup. So since we don't have the cost for that, how do we move forward at this point? Because we were given a scenario 1, a scenario 2. Carlton had said to Commissioner Kennard he could bring back a scenario 3. So what do you need us to do today?
Well, I think solid waste is looking for a recommendation, scenario 1 or 2. If y'all are not comfortable with 1 or 2, then I guess you ask solid waste to bring back alternative 3 as soon as they can, and then you'll have 3 to choose from.
Would it be fair to say that regardless if we have a scenario 3 where we do that, we still need to decide on what we're going to do with 1 or 2?
From a legal perspective, I was answering the question. I'm sure solid waste has thoughts on what they need.
Oh, absolutely. One way or another, the rates are going to have to increase. I'm not sure how long it would take us, but I could do a little research and find out how quickly we could get with the other counties and find out what that rate would be if we were to bring that garbage their direction, and then implement that into our rates that we have at our solid waste facility to see the need we would have in the future.
How dire is the situation with the rates?
What we have, in the past year, we were going to bring this forward. There were some delays. The Public Works Director at the time didn't really like the PowerPoint presentation at the time, and we were tweaking that, and we missed the deadline. So there are dates that we have to meet as far as when this gets implemented for the rates so that it can be actually put into the tax rolls for next year. So I would imagine we have a pretty short window.
And it also includes the commercial hauler, the commercial assessment. I mean,
Right,
I know,
correct.
Commissioner, you've been not liking that for quite a while, so, I mean,
I don't, but I want to obviously do what's best for the taxpayers at this
So
point.
There are some next steps, actually, that they added towards the end. Thank you. So you can see the scenarios, board direction funding we were hoping for on April 8th today, adoption of the ordinance amending some of these changes that we talked about. Currently there's no penalties for anyone who's actually taking the trash out of the county. They're not allowed to take that. There's an ordinance that says that, but there's no penalty as to what happens if they do. So we were looking to add and clarify that. We were talking about suspension of the, actually, Josh, you could probably explain those last few there for me.
Yeah, if you don't mind. She's super close.
Okay. So this is a proposed timeline right now. As I go through these dates, I want to let you know the proposed end date right now is July 29th to make a decision on your assessment rates and your updated tipping fees. You have actually legally until September 15th to make a decision on the residential assessment. So you could push this out. This is just the schedule that it was anticipated coming into this workshop. Sort of related to the whole process of, removing the commercial fee and making some other updates, we have prepared some revisions to your existing solid waste code, which is in Chapter 82, to make certain clarifications and to revise some definitions that need to be consistent with state law. We've built in some options for you all to consider with regard to additional enforcement mechanisms, because you do have a lot of rules on your collectors and your haulers, but sometimes they're not being enforced, or it's difficult to enforce. You're spending $1 to chase a dime. So we are proposing some alternatives for you guys to consider, such as a citation process, a ticket process that's enforced through the courts, the ability to suspend or revoke hauler licenses who are making, certain egregious violations over and over, and late fees. Haulers who are not paying on time, imposing late fees, so that there is a financial penalty or depending on how you look at it, a financial incentive to pay on time. Some separate load requirements, and then just various revisions to your existing certification of haulers provisions. That ordinance would also, in addition to making these updates to your Chapter 82 that's in your code, would actually repeal Chapter 90, Article 18, which is your existing process for the commercial assessments. And then instead, and the residential assessments, and instead you would just use your existing master ordinance to impose those residential assessments. So that would all, under this current schedule, would be targeted for June 10th. That ordinance is already drafted. It's in underline and strike through so you guys can see it. It doesn't have to go on June 10th, but that's the current target date. At that same June 10th meeting then, you would be asked to adopt your initial assessment resolution for your residential assessments. The residential rate per dwelling unit would be staying at the $27, but since we're getting rid of the Chapter 90, you would be using your existing master ordinance, which is already on your books. Same process you use for fire each year. Then the public hearing for final imposition of your residential assessments is targeted for July 29th. And on that same date, you would be adopting a rate resolution to update the solid waste rates, the various rates whichever scenario you go with, that Henry just walked you through. As I said, July 29th is sort of a target date right now. If you wanted to keep your solid waste rate revisions and your solid waste residential assessment on the same schedule, that drop dead date where you would have to adopt that would be September 15th for those rates to go into effect for your tax bill that goes out this November. So that is, and that's a statutory deadline. You don't have any flex in that if you want to make it for this year.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Davis?
it seems to me that if we do the no debt route, which is the higher assessment, if we indeed need to pivot, that at least puts us in a better position to pivot to the transfer station. And in the meantime, try to pull those numbers together just so we have the backup plan.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, me too.
And I would also do the indexing. Do we need to have an agreement on that today? For the indexing, putting the indexing.
I'm good with that.
It makes sense.
I like it. Okay, so we're clear. That's scenario 1
Yes.
with the indexing.
Yes.
And 3 out of 5 of you, what is your
Janet, are you-
consensus?
I'll live with it.
5-0.
All right, we got 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're going to open it up to the public. Would anyone from the public like to address the board on this issue? Seeing none?
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, but y'all have to know, like, the mountains of work that went into this. I mean, y'all are awesome. Like,
This has been going on for so long,
yeah, it has.
for so long. All right, so we have closed open to the public. In about 35 minutes, 40 minutes, we're going to have another meeting. So we are adjourned.